we're just going to keep recording and recording and recording and upsetting everybody in the process.
Until morale improves.
Exactly. When was the last time that you and I were in front of a microphone? 1 week? 2 weeks?
Week and a half. Week and a few days, I guess.
Too long!
Maybe for you.
I know nothing's too long for you. So, here we are. We've been putting out episodes the past week, which was 4th of July, which should be a week. Look, if the faggots get a month, Americans should get a week, at least. And to put 4th of July on a Tuesday is especially cruel.
They didn't put it on a Tuesday. It fell on a Tuesday.
Yes, but if you have Memorial Day as like the second Sunday that ends in Y, or like the 4th in June, or some shit like that, or if you're doing all of that stuff, at least make a week of like American Week. Something like that. Like, make it so that you don't have maybe the 4th of July off because it's a weekday, maybe not, and then the rest of the week everyone's slumping around on Thursday reading emails as if they haven't been, nursing a hangover.
So you're telling me that you think we should have an entire week where the country grinds to a halt and nothing, like, we don't get mail, we don't get...
How would you know the difference between that and what it's like now? Like, the country already ground to a halt last week. We went, okay...
Yeah, but at least we got mail.
For America, your favorite Lana Del Rey song. So I wanted to open up with this. I was on a road trip, and I basically traveled 3,000 miles in the past week. Like, it was the equivalent of going to, like, the boot of Italy to, like, the UK and back. Like, in Europe, that covers, like, 53 countries. In the US, that covered, like, 8 states.
Right.
But... you got to see a fascinating slice of America. And there's a hot dog stand in Butte, Montana, with a little smiling wiener as their logo that was closed on Monday and Tuesday. We got there on Monday because the 4th of July was on Tuesday. So don't tell me this country doesn't grind to a halt already for a week.
A smiling wiener closed. You should be used to that. I don't know.
You're just stretching metaphors, aren't you? But I do have to say, a few. I don't want to say reminiscences because that sounds a little bit too much, but a few observations about this country. One,
parts of this country.
Half.
Please do not generalize.
It's half. I'm not counting, East Dakota, or the other parts that are not real. The West is wildly different from the East. And in a lot of ways because you can go a long period of time and there is nothing.
Yes.
There's absolutely nothing. So, LA people drive a lot to Vegas. That's kind of a common thing.
Couple hours.
It's a few hours, yeah. It's not an easy drive because...
You're going through desert.
Well, but the freeway gets narrow, and it's kind of this like rickety, narrow freeway going through the desert, and it's like nothing, abandoned home, nothing, solar farm, nothing, 2 more hours, nothing, border casino, which is really kind of sketch, and then another stretch of nothing, and then you sort of like fall down into Vegas.
Have
you driven into Vegas?
Yes, sorry. That plane noise threw me for a second.
What do you think?
It sounded like something else, and then I realized, it's just a plane.
What? You being renditioned?
No, so the last time my parents took a road trip out here, and we went. I don't even remember where we went. We drove somewhere else.
Get some more water.
We drove that little stretch between parts of California and Vegas, and it just sort of appears out of nowhere. You're driving along with nothing, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're in Vegas. Like,
it really is this mirage in the desert. Like, they were right about that.
But it begins and ends very abruptly. Like, there's nothing around it. Like, it's like there's like a force field around Vegas. Like, we cannot cross this boundary.
Like, if you fell asleep at the South Point Casino, I think is the furthest south. There's the one at the border, but the furthest south in Vegas is the South Point Casino, I think.
I don't know.
If you fell asleep, it's not a strip casino. It's like south. It's like south of the strip, south of the airport, everything like that.
Right.
And they get like Barry Manilow one more time, like shit like that. The really you talk about it's the who's left of the who's left.
Charo, one more time.
Charo is a main stage performer. Charo, I will have you know, can outperform any of these sons of bitches.
Excuse me.
How dare you?
How dare I besmirch her name?
Besmirch. Peace be
and her
upon
coochie.
And how dare you besmirch her coochie? That's going to cover our second topic today, too. There's been some coochies besmirched. So,
Kim Petra? No.
if you were taking a nap at South Point and you fell asleep and there was no traffic, you would enter and end Vegas in like 11 minutes and completely miss the entire thing. Like if you're a car sleeper, you can wake up by the In-N-Out on the far end and be like, what the fuck just happened? And then completely miss, what is this? You'd think this enormous city.
Enter and exit in how long?
11 minutes.
Sounds like my last date.
No, it wasn't. You had a wonderful last date and I was there.
You gotta clarify.
I was six
I was
tables
not
away.
dating him.
No, God.
And he was not eavesdropping.
The only way you date me is when you put on your Botox and your little Baby Jane outfit and you sit next to me. Date both of us.
I wouldn't date you then either.
That's the only way you date us, by reference. So, it's this very strange city. So once you leave Vegas, though, this is where the real trip begins. Because, like, okay, people do LA Vegas. People really don't go on the other end. And so you can continue and you go up through the rest of Nevada, which is not very far. You're at the little, like, pinched off end of Nevada. And then you go into a weird corner of Arizona where these, like, fantastic, like, red rocks and, like, I think that's where, like, the Devil's Armchair and stuff like that is. Or all those, the Monument Valley where people go and they see that. Have you done that?
I don't think that's technically Monument Valley, but
wherever they do those, like, red rocks, though. Because that's also the Grand Canyon direction, too.
Right. I think Monument Valley is closer to the Four Corners area.
Oh, okay. But there's a lot of, like, strange formations.
Right.
Then...
like Sedona-esque.
Yes.
Sedona light.
Like, yes, Sedona adjacent. And then you wander up further into Utah, and then it gets really bleak. Because it is desert, it is high desert, it is summer, and... appearing like Vegas out of nowhere is a city called St. George, Utah. It is the most...
oh, yeah. I've been through there.
It is the most spotless city I've ever seen in my life. Everything is new.
I think we slept there one night.
You probably did because that's like, I think, the 2 hours out point. Something like that. Everything's new. There's brand new homes, gorgeous homes on the vistas and everything like that. I think it's very Mormon. I mean, it is Utah, but I think that's part of the purpose. But a lot of, like, company headquarters and stuff there, like check your mail. Like, if you ever get something, it's like from some random, like, Spectrum or Comcast or something, they probably have an office in St. George, Utah that sent it to you. I think that they have very business-friendly regulations. So you see that, and then you go another, like, godforsaken distance, and you finally hit one of my favorite cities in the country, Salt Lake City, which, after every experience there, is, again, spotless, safe, you can walk around downtown, has a functional public transportation system, and has very good restaurants.
Okay. I'll reserve my comments.
What's your comment about Salt Lake City?
I felt really weird there.
There is something deeply off, but if you choose to ignore that, it's fine. It's like downtown Disney. You walk through there and you're like, something isn't right, but that's okay, everything's clean.
You can't ignore it. Like, I went to, the Mormon Tabernacle. Yeah.
Yeah, the temple.
Yeah, the temple.
Because there's the old temple and then the new temple. The old temple's still under renovation.
Right.
Probably wasn't when you went, but it is now.
We went there, and it's immaculate, it's spotless, it's pristine. Everyone is just a little bit too nice.
Yes. It's a little scary.
It just feels like you are... for that reason, after visiting there, I sort of lumped, and shame on me for this, I realize that because I am a Christian, Mormons are technically Christian adjacent.
You were walking through Salt Lake City
but
saying, she's not a Christian?
No, I look at them and say, "You're not human." Like,
Oh my god! You can't.
no,
You can't call Mormons non-human.
I lumped them into like the category of like Scientology. Like those two are very similar to me because it's like they believe in like some really weird things, and like you're not allowed in like a Mormon temple unless you're Mormon. Like to me, that reeks of okay. Well, what are you doing in there that I'm not allowed to see?
I don't
Like
know.
at least the Catholics, we allow you to come to our mass, but you just can't receive the Eucharist and all that stuff. Like that's special, but you can at least observe, you can watch, you can participate.
Well, they do have public. And okay, now to be fair,
I'm not trying to disparage anyone.
As a Mormon
It just-
Scientologist,
I'm not trying to disparage anyone. It just was very unsettling feeling for me.
here's the now from what I understand, because I had a friend in college who I didn't know was Mormon, and she didn't tell me until much later. But it was right around the Prop 8 thing when they were protesting at the Mormon temple. She said, the thing that they don't understand about us is that temple is only for special occasions. So the temple, like the actual temple, the big temple itself, is not thought of the way that people think of a traditional
regular church. Yeah.
It's simply ceremonial, and for that purpose, like the gender divided temples in Judaism and things like that, it's very off limits, but they have like come in and get a brochure and places of worship and meeting halls and stuff like that are considered. And I have to say, by extension, Scientology is the same. You can have brunch at the Celebrity Center, or you can walk in and get a pamphlet on Hollywood Boulevard, which they're all too happy to give you. You can't go upstairs to the empty rooms because I think, like Mormonism, they realize after a certain point, you just walk in and it's empty. That doesn't look good. It doesn't look good if you have a house of worship and it's just empty. The Catholics bring you in so that they can, boost up the crowd sizes. They're smart in that aspect. I also have to say, I have a lot of respect for any religion that takes making their immediate environment look better around it. And that's where the Catholics do well. That's where the Scientologists do well. Like, they renovate a lot of buildings, and they do a very good job. And the Mormons, too. Everything is clean. Everything is nice. The landscaping looks good. Like, I have to give them credit for that. If you walk around a Unitarian, in quotation marks, church, it looks like shit.
Right, but it's to the for I realize this sounds very biased. Again, I'm
Lady
a Catholic.
Naga is gonna lynch you.
No, I know I'm a Catholic. I'm going to sound very biased. I realize this, and I probably am biased. But as I was walking through those grounds, I just kept feeling like this is clean to entice me to join your cult. Like this is clean to entice me to go, oh, what's over here? As you like put a bag over my head and like whisk me off somewhere. It's unsettling. It's unnerving. I don't like it.
So's the Grove, but they didn't make you vote for Rick Caruso.
I would have if I were registered here.
I feel like when you walk through it, it's almost like that scene from from Shrek, like "Welcome to Duloc, such a perfect town," which that's a banger, by the way. But it is a little bit of that effect. The unsettling thing I noticed this time, though, was not the cleanliness or the politeness or everything like that. It was bad stuff. Now, first of all, Salt Lake City is the gayest city in the United States.
Second,
What's first? Santa Fe?
Santa Fe has the highest gay population per capita.
So Santa Fe is the gayest per capita. Salt Lake City has the lesbians per capita.
No, it's the second gayest per capita.
So there you go.
It's more gay than San Francisco per capita.
Yeah. Because not many of the homeless are gay, I don't think. So
Don't do anything for a hot meal.
there was a lot of... There was no official pride flags, like nothing no crosswalks, no nothing like that. But there were a lot of pride flags outside of homes and coffee shops and stuff like that. And there's a lot of I sensed a lot of LA copying.
But
It felt like a very clean Los Feliz, Silver Lake kind of vibe of like, oh, we're indie, we're cool, here's a pride flag. But it's clean.
But was it a pride flag or a progress pride flag?
Both. I saw the arrow thing. I saw some rainbow flags, but I saw the arrow thing. I saw it at some bars that were not gay. Which apparently up until recently, I believe you had to have a membership to join a bar there. It was like a members only thing because it couldn't be open to the public, so they could verify people's ages.
I can see that.
So there is that as well. But the food was very good, and it was a Sunday and everything was very closed. So we couldn't even go to the mall and walk around. at like 6, 7 p.m. So that was the end of that. That was Salt Lake City. We stayed in the 70s themed Airbnb, which was kind of groovy until they had no detergent for the washer and dryer. And then we played 2 Donna Summer songs, and it was like, all right, that's enough. Let's go. So I just want to do the first half of this trip.
But did you leave the cake out in the rain?
It wasn't MacArthur Park. It was my favorite Donna Summer song, This Time I Know It's For Real, which came out after Disco. It came out in the 80s. It was her last hit.
Disco went into the 80s, thank you.
I
80s.
don't think you were there at Disco Demolition Night. But it was a dance song that came out after disco, but everything else was disco themed. So they got the wrong era, but they at least got one of my favorite songs, so it worked out. But I'll just do the first half of this trip on this episode. We'll do the second half on the next episode.
Oh, God.
We're looking for America, you son of a bitch. You can't groan on the microphone. So you leave Salt Lake City, and then we're driving up to North Idaho that same day, which means you exit Utah, which that part north of Salt Lake City was some of the most beautiful stuff that we saw. There's farms, there's green hillsides. It's like something out of like a Microsoft background, which we did end up driving through that area in the state of Washington where they actually filmed that, or photographed that. But it's everything is very like bucolic.
Is that where you stopped and took that disgusting picture of you like craning your ass
We'll
out?
get to that on the way down.
Okay.
We'll get to that on the way down. Okay. But also something you notice is a little bit unsettling. Every town even small towns with like a few hundred people driving out of it goes Utah into Idaho, into Montana, back into Idaho. So you have like 4 twists that you do, like up into the mountains and then back across. Everyone has a white steeple building. That's not a church. It's a Mormon temple. So it looks like a church. It acts like a church.
Sorry, it sounded like someone hit something with a car. Because he backed up and I heard a crunch.
I think back to the mail truck. Oh, well. It's going down here.
Sorry.
So
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. It's a steeple building that looks like a 1950s church that would be in the South. Like very structured, mannered, and designed. But no cross on the top.
It's the messenger guy, right? No?
It's just the steeple. Nothing. There is nothing on the top. It's very odd and unsettling.
But it's a Mormon temple?
Yes.
I thought all of them had to have
I think they put those out in the courtyard and stuff now.
The prophet Joshua?
Something like that.
One of those prophets, like, with the horn and shit? Yeah.
No, it was nothing. They had nothing. So that was something I also noticed is very interesting. And some of them were very new. So there's new communities sprouting up there because they do have a lot of children going through that portion of the country. Then we go up into Montana, and there is a... Sorry. Why are you closing the window?
Because there was a glare off the car, and it was blinding me.
Oh, God.
Much better. I can actually see your ugly face now.
So there... Driving into Montana, there's like 5 cities in Montana. And so I was like, well, let's stop actually Kyle suggested, let's stop in Butte and we'll get lunch. Butte was once one of the wealthiest cities in the West because the whole hill behind it was mined, and it was called the richest mountain on Earth at the time, in like 1905 or something.
Mind of...
It had all kinds of mining. Oh, okay. So they had copper, and they had, I think there was some silver and things like that. Lots of mining towns along the way, but this was the big one. Everything looks like they stopped building in 1905, and no one has renovated anything since. So there are Victorian lean-tos that are literally leaning into the street. And these brick buildings, we stop at this little courtyard cafe, and there was this very old woman with her very old daughter and son, so she was even older. And I felt so bad because she was walking out, and they were trying to help her out, and her panties fell.
Oh, God.
Look, you know me. I show everything on my face.
She wore them until the elastic fell off.
You know me. I just looked the other way, and I brought up something else to Kyle, and I think he saw it too, and I just, was waiting for my sandwich, and so I just put my face into my iced tea, and I kept going. And I have to give myself credit for not visually reacting to that at all. So, I was like, there, but for the grace of God, go us.
Not me.
Us.
Nope.
I know you don't wear panties. But... there we go. Then we walk out of the restaurant in Butte, Montana, and this guy in a lowered Charger gets out, stops by a guy with a motorcycle, starts revving, and then gets out to like fight with this guy. We were gonna walk through town and we're like, all right, that's our cue. Let's leave. So Butte, Montana is apparently the most dangerous town there, and on our trip. And so then we go through like these really hilly areas and then back down into Idaho. There's nothing else remarkable that happened. I'm still looking for America, but I'll get to that on the second episode. I just think it's fascinating to me that the West, especially the area where we went, it is very sparse, and that's okay. It's okay that there's natural environments that are between these cities. These are also the cities that are experiencing growth in the way that Rust Belt cities are contracting, because in the areas we went to, they get maybe a light dusting of snow, but they're not hampered by snow, 5 months out of the year. They get cold, but they don't get freezing.
Montana does.
In parts of Montana, but this is like the dry side. Like there's the wet side and the dry side, but this is the drier.
What'd you call me?
This was the drier side. But it was just very interesting. I'll get to the second half of the trip later, but I wanted to introduce that to kind of act as a segue into our topic, where the most interesting battle happening in America right now is the Burbank, Glendale, North Hollywood school board situation. Now, this is where America's expanding in the West. This is where the real sort of PTA involvement is happening, is in suburb cities. So they're their own cities, but they are suburbs of larger cities where you have a high percentage of an upwardly mobile Middle Eastern, Asian minority population, like Burbank, Glendale. Some have moved into North Hollywood area. And what those people of those backgrounds value in their children's education. So I wanted to set all that up because apparently something... Now, we've talked, I think, in the previous episode about the trans flag hoax at the Saticoy Elementary. And we talked about the Glendale school board meeting in the sense that there were some parents that showed up. And
we roughly talked about it, yeah.
Like, we alluded to it. There was a very interesting interview on a podcast called Wise Nuts, which is two Armenians who sit and talk endlessly.
Yeah.
Which this podcast is halfway there. On everything.
For the record, for those of you listening, Colin, be thankful that we do not go on for 4.5 hours because, to do my due diligence and my research and listening to this episode that, we're about to talk about, these people talked to this man for 4.5 hours in like a quote unquote interview. Like
they out-Rogan'd Rogan. It was a lot.
It was a lot.
So the man that these two gentlemen, two Armenian guys called Wise Nuts, and they've interviewed a couple people. Like they interviewed some. They've
had over
names.
200 episodes.
Yeah, and they've had some notable. Like I think we can bring. Let me bring up on Spotify these guys because I had it open. They've interviewed some people that you might know because it's on Spotify, right? Let me see. Wise Nuts. Armand, Edgar, and Arno. God, they interviewed Maz Jobrani. Like he's like a legit, comedian. So basically, I have to get myself onto Wise Nuts one way or another.
I mean, you probably could. You're Armenian.
I just put my name in, and I'm just like, "Hi, this is me." Like I'm like Ani Nazarian, Ani Simonian, Ani Anian. Oh my gosh, I'm related to half these fucking people. So they had a he's a self-proclaimed democratic socialist. I didn't know this.
Yes. He said that on the episode.
And a self-proclaimed Greek person named Constantine Anthony. He is
and he's autistic.
Ugh, pick a struggle. He's the
mayor of Burbank. He was
the vice mayor of Burbank.
But he's now the mayor of
February, because they interviewed him before. I'm looking through.
Oh.
So he was the vice mayor and somehow became the mayor.
Yeah, he had been on there.
So maybe, I don't know if the mayor died or something like that. But
he said
elected?
Yeah, he said he was elected to the mayorship with a record-breaking number of votes.
So it's really unusual for me to think of a democratic socialist becoming mayor of Burbank because people think, that was crazy, the left coast, that kind of stuff. I hope that between these two episodes I can dispel that notion. I saw more conservatism in this past week than I have from anybody in fucking Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina or any of your bullshit primary states in the past 8 years. So you can can all that stuff, family values. You know, there's people actually out there actually reproducing, not, you know, getting vasectomies. And they're building Mormon towns, and they're more conservative than any of you will ever be with your summits and your crap. So I'm so tired of these primary states and their bullshit. But I'm seeing the future of conservatism. It's called having kids. But so Burbank is more conservative than the C cities. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. More conservative than a lot of the Rust Belt. And mostly in the sense of you have people from, like, you know, Armenians or Christians, some conservative Asian backgrounds, as well as some older money, and some younger families who, you know, okay, family values. A lot of people earning, you know, more than the median salary, who want safe neighborhoods, a nice place to live, stuff like that. Like, for those who are not from here, you probably know Burbank by the fact that it has the gun stores. Because the city of LA, you can't have gun stores, but in the city of Burbank, you can. There's like 4 of them on one street.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's a very conservative area. So the fact that a guy who is a self-avowed democratic socialist would become mayor of Burbank is very strange to me. But anyway, they went on his show, and he
went on their show.
He went on their show. Oh, yeah, that's right. He went on their show, and they got under his collar very quickly.
And I have to put on the record here that he asked to be on their show. He asked to be interviewed by them.
Right.
Because he wanted to, as he said, stop and dispel the quote-unquote misinformation that these guys were apparently pushing that he had heard in previous episodes.
Okay.
About, you know, the curriculum at the schools and you know, what the school board was and was not doing about it. Turns out after 4.5 hours, I think they're, you know, these two fathers who have talked to and worked with many of the other Armenian families in the Glendale School District know a lot more than this bumfuck from mayor of Burbank.
Yes.
He looked like a complete, not only like douchebag, like just really dismissive and patronizing.
And they had people call in, they had families call in, parents call in. Very much went to the emotional argument as expected from people on that side, and also very much went into like the exception of the exception, like trying to find the exceptional. Well, what if your child had to go to a friend's parents' house and they only trusted the friend's parent to talk about the fact that they wanted to transition and they couldn't come to you? Like, wouldn't you rather they go to that friend's parent instead of a homeless person and talk about it? Like, okay, this is like, we're going so far into the fucking exception here. Like, that's insane. But a lot of what the parents want in this school district and in these districts is, it's similar to the 1776 project and what that's done. Parents need to be involved with the education of their students, and many school boards have gone out of their way to write parents out of being informed of what's happening with their education and purposefully exclude them from the curriculum, from the books that are being put in the library, like genderqueer, and from parental notification if something happens with one of their children, and receiving funding from large organizations to push a certain ideology of, in a way, encouraging children to explore being trans at a prepubescent age.
Right, but it's not only the gender and trans stuff. That's a huge, you know, part of it, and was a huge part of the conversation.
That's the one that's in the most relief. Yeah.
Right. But they gave other one of the callers who the moms who called in gave very good other examples. So one being a particular school, and I don't remember the name, and I probably wouldn't even say it if I remembered it. One particular school had listed on their curriculum for the week that they sent out to parents something called, like, it was a cutesy name, dealing with the school mascot, you know, like, it made it seem like it was almost like a pep rally type thing. Like 25 minutes out of a Friday set aside for this thing.
Right. And Friday is when kids already check it anyway, so they'll be like, Bobcat Bobby socks, like stuff like that.
So they gave it a cutesy name so the parents wouldn't think twice about it. They're like, oh, okay, it's just some stupid thing. Well, one parent who was already kind of, dubious about the what was going on, skeptical, that was the word I was looking for. She looked into it, and so she dug a little bit further and found out that this was a 25-minute period of social emotional learning.
Oh, God.
But this is 25 minutes taken out of regular curriculum. So, like, instead of building up math and English scores, which they are woefully behind in, we're going to talk about social emotional learning.
Now, speaking of social, this democratic socialist has admitted that their scores are going way down, that the lockdowns were disastrous for education, and you have an increasing number of students who can't do basic math and can't read at higher and higher grades, which means there is a multi-year, I would say cohort of students who are extremely behind in skills compared to just a few years prior.
Right.
Or so both the people after them and especially the people before them. So that's not good. Social emotional learning, the fact that time was taken out of the school day and it's not the approach of the teacher in making students comfortable with sharing feelings and talking about things and being aware of enneagrams or whatever they talk about, but the fact that they're like, okay, we're going to slap this block on and just have this, which also turns out to be a Trojan horse for other things, is a real problem.
Right. And the other example that was given, which I think to me is probably even more egregious. This woman said, I enrolled my son in a course entitled Introduction to Coding.
Yeah.
Because he gave me he expressed a desire that he wanted to be, work in the IT industry and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so she said, this would be a good introduction for you, get your feet wet type thing. 2 weeks into the class, she asks him, what are you learning? And he's like, oh, well, it's not really coding. So she did some digging. They were learning, it was a course sponsored and paid for by Verizon for this school about like social justice and equity in social media.
What?
And when she told like the administrators, school administrators, like why are they doing this in this course? They said, oh, well, on the books, we didn't have something to label this course as. So we knew we weren't actually teaching coding. So we just called it Introduction to Coding.
What?
And, just so we could officially have it on the books, because any title of a class has to be approved by blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And we didn't have time. And I'm just like, then why is that not told to students and or parents ahead of time, right? Like, if you're seeing a course being offered, you're going to assume that that's the course being offered.
Especially because, first of all, a course on social media is retarded. When I was in the Pepperdine MBA program, we took a course on social media. We did create a Twitter account. It's retarded. So that's stupid to begin with. Second of all, they know that these James Damore style Asperger's level guys are going to take this course naturally, and it's going to be used to then try to be like, oh, you're this, you're that, you need to do this, and misinformation, online, everything like that. They're the ones that are most, quote, susceptible to the ideologies they don't like because they don't care. HR cannot reach these people. DEI education cannot reach these people because literally they are there to do a job. They do not give a fuck about all of your emotions and all of your, injustices and stolen land nonsense and any shit like that.
But
By the way, I drove through a lot of stolen land this past weekend, and I didn't make one fucking acknowledgement. And every reservation along the way had a sign saying, "This is Nez Perce, this is that, this is a Blackfoot Indian reservation." And every single one, by the way, is also one of the worst, poorest environments for people to be in.
Yeah.
Take from that what you will, but continue.
Well, no, it screams of, if you're not being transparent with us, we're going to assume that you're doing this covertly for nefarious reasons.
Right.
As a parent, I would assume, well, you didn't tell me the truth, so therefore you thought I would just not ever question it and assume that my kid was learning about coding.
Like, what else are you trying to hide? And this is the thing where teachers, in a lot of sense, and I mean, I mean this in the best way. Teachers are getting it on all ends because they're handed a curriculum to teach, which increasingly they're not able to determine themselves. The administrators whose literal six-figure job it is to make teachers' lives easier, make parents happy, and make sure that kids learn, are the ones standing in the way of doing abso-fucking-lutely nothing to benefit these students. And they're the ones that, they're not on the front lines taking the brunt of what teachers take, but they're the ones who are causing the problems that is affecting everybody. So they're the ones who, for example, for that course, are in charge of being like, well, we're taking this amount of money from Verizon, so we have to do a course. Might as well just call it Introduction to Coding, even though it's about how to set up a grinder or something like that.
Or how to be nice to racial minorities on Twitter. Or I don't even know what the class was teaching, but
The whole
social
point of
justice,
Twitter is that nobody's nice to anybody.
social justice on social media, something of that effect. It's
God.
like, what would you even be learning in a course like that? I don't
It's
understand.
because Verizon got a government grant to talk about shit like that, so they're passing it on to the schools. Everyone gets a tax write-off along the way, and everyone's happy. But, kids, is our children learning? No. And this is why I understand these style of communities, the Mormon communities, and the other ones, driving up the way that I did. I understand why they homeschool. I understand why they're saying, look, the educational system has gone so far out of a parent's reach that even if you are sitting in the background of every classroom that your child is going to school in, you cannot sit around and be perpetually outraged. Why don't we just band some parents together in a community? We'll start our own little community school. We'll teach them with some of our values, which, some of the Mormon values I might not necessarily agree with, but I doubt that many of them are encouraging you to become a bad person. But teach our children values like, starting a family and things like that. Also practical skills, like they're very good bankers, they're very intelligent, they're very good at math and coding and everything like that. Like, teach them some marketable skills so that they can have a chance. Why would I send my child to, and that's what this all comes down to, why would I send my child to a school where they are going to, not even learn how to read, but almost be discouraged to be the best person that they can be, in a lot of senses. That's, I think, what a lot of it comes down to.
Yeah.
And this democratic socialist guy would agree on all of the problems. These kids can't read, and there's too many administrators, and there's too much bureaucratic bloat, and everything like this. So he agreed on all the problems and none of the solutions.
Well, no, he didn't offer any solutions.
He didn't offer any and just was combative, but then he didn't have a counter. It was like, his whole argument was, it's not that bad. And it's like...
Several times he said either, no, that's not true.
Yes.
Meaning, I think you are lying to me,
Yes.
and you are a constituent, potential constituent, or someone I'd like to vote for.
Well, he's running for, we should clarify,
Los Angeles Board of Supervisors.
which is a very, very powerful, more powerful than many state governments, because it administers LA County, which is 9 million people.
So his response was, you're either not telling me the truth,
Right.
or that is anecdotal evidence, and that's not happening everywhere. Number one, if it's happening one place, it's probably happening several other schools as well.
Right.
Number two, who cares if it's anecdotal? It's still happening, and you need to fucking care about it and do something about it. Like, that's not a defense.
If people want to understand how important parents are to voting and the election system in this country, and any sort of local governments, local, state, supervisor level, county, city, or even national level, the only reason you know who Ron DeSantis is because of his educational policy and the wins that were achieved there. That's it. This man has no personality. He walks around and bleats the same speeches to 5 people. He was, he opened the state slightly earlier than other states, but not as early as some. The only reason you know who he is because of what he did with educational policy. That is the core of everything. And that basically got him reelected to a large degree.
Yeah.
Look, he's not
Because he listened to concerned parents.
And he listened to concerned parents, and he listened to smart advisors who said, look, this is what wins. And whether or not, I'm sure he believes it, but, whether or not any other issues matter, this is the one that matters the most. And this is why school board races are being turned in this country, and why when conservatives have chosen over the past 40 to 50 years to sort of step away from education or not be as involved in education because they feel powerless, they have ceded ground in education to a lot of other people whose primary job is to shape education in their own worldview. Democratic socialists and hippies and the like.
So there's before we close this out, there's two other points to this interview and podcast episode that I'd like to bring up that were the major highlights. And I'll save the juiciest one for last. So I'll start with this one. June 6th, which is when the Glendale protest that turned violent happened.
Yeah.
They talked a good bit about that, but some of the...
Because they were all there.
Right.
This guy was there behind maybe a girl speaking.
Right. Some of the parents...
trans legislator or drag queen legislator.
So these two men who were hosting the podcast as well as some of the ones who called in were all there.
Yeah.
And they all raised the same point of, we were there to speak about our concerns about our children.
Yes.
We were there like 5 hours before the meeting actually started because we knew it was going to be big because it had already been picked up by local and national news.
Yes.
So we got there in plenty of time to make sure that we had our names on the list to possibly speak. You came in hours after we got there, walked up to the board, and put your name in, and somehow you spoke, but we didn't.
That's bad form.
And you don't have a child in this school district. You don't have a vested interest in Glendale.
Right, because Burbank is a different city.
Why are you allowed to speak and we're not? Why are
Right.
we being silenced? And he basically laughed it off saying, well, I mean, I am running for a political office and I needed to, get my face out there, basically. It's like, you said what now?
You use this as a campaign opportunity, but this is like Burbank and Glendale. It's like being in like he's in Brooklyn and Glendale's Queens. They're completely different areas with completely different neighborhoods and completely different districts and populations and demographics. The only thing that's similar about them is they're both relatively conservative compared to Los Angeles as a whole.
At large, yeah.
But that was bad form. So what's the juiciest?
The juiciest is the clip that has made somewhat of the rounds on Twitter. So some of you may have seen this. One of the callers, a concerned mother who called in, asked him, how do you feel about the sexualized content and the gender ideology content that is in the school libraries? And he said, oh, what do you mean by sexualized content? Do you mean, and he said it in a very, very condescending, dismissive, patronizing tone. Do you mean like a book that just has a gay character in it? Is that what you're so mad about? And she said, no, I'm referring to books that have explicit sexual content. Have you ever seen or have you ever read the book Genderqueer? And he said, oh yeah, I've read that book. Okay.
So this is like a weird graphic novel thing because it's that crappy hand-drawn shit that everybody goes gaga over. And it graphically depicts
and descripts
the scripts. That's the publisher, Descripts. It graphically illustrates sexual contact between people who are not of a legal age.
Two minor boys engaging in oral sex.
Okay, so
pictures of this.
Yes, so this goes way beyond Lolita. Like, this is some fucked up shit.
Right. And this is available for students to look at middle school levels.
Right.
And so when she asked him, have you read this book? And he says, yes. And of course, our natural instinct is to say, well, I mean, he must be lying, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't actually read the book.
Or he's saying, oh, sure, I've heard of it,
And she goes, well, you don't find, those pictures to be sexually explicit? And he said, no. So that's sort of where the clip ends, and it has spliced. It has. Well, no, he said it like that. The clip has spliced in. Someone edited in pictures, the pictures that they were referring
to. The depictions he's talking about, yes.
So you can see, clearly they're explicit. But what happened after is, to me, the most egregious part of this is after that clip ends, if you keep watching the episode or listening to the episode, he then doubles down and says, no, I know exactly what pictures you're talking about. I've seen them all over the internet, and I think that they're fine, especially for a middle school audience, because those are the kids being taught sex education in the first place.
This is not a health depiction of a cross-section of a vagina.
Right. So learning about, the menstrual cycle, learning about how babies are made, reproduction, all of that stuff, how, the actual biology is one thing. Showing and discussing fellatio between minors, not the same thing. And to make a comparison and equivalence to that is disgusting.
I'll say this. I think up until, this book came out a couple years ago? I'll say this. Up until a couple years ago, I don't think anyone went to school and had a book in their library that showed someone getting sucked off. Of any gender, right. Of anything. I don't think anyone saw any of that in a library up until some pervert decided to draw some graphic novel.
And I read an interview with the author of that book, Genderqueer, and to his/her/its credit, they're non-binary. I don't know what to call them.
Shocker!
Yeah. To this person's credit...
Oh, it is glare.
Yeah, he said... she said, I think it was a biological woman. Anyway, she said, I wrote this book about my own experiences. I don't think that it should be in an elementary school. Or, I don't know if she said
even the author's
school.
like, this isn't for kids.
Yes, even the author was like, while it's, cartoonish and animated, it's not necessarily for a young audience.
And that author was Nancy Reagan.
But for someone who as progressive and as, fucked up in the head as this person who wrote this book, given what he/she went through, I understand, you have your struggles. We all have our struggles. So, she wrote it, she put that stuff out there, but she acknowledges, no, this probably isn't the best for minors, right?
I don't think it's the best for anybody. I really don't.
Who cares? I don't want to know about your, I don't want to know about your sob story unless we're good friends.
Even then, I don't want to see a graphic novel of it. That's disgusting.
No.
Graphic novels are already kind of a mult as it is. It's why would you want to do that and have sexual depictions in it? That's gross.
The graphic novel has had its moment. It's come and went.
Oh, clearly, I saw the clip. Yeah, I don't.
But I
just don't. There's half of me that I say, okay, I don't understand why someone would backtrack and backtrack and backtrack. No, stubborn like a donkey. And at the other half, I do, because his whole emotional argument was well, what do you want to be, a Nazi and ban books now? That's the whole argument of we always get back to this thing of they burn books, therefore you can say, well, wait a second. Okay, this is literally about as explicit as a book can get, and 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds are in a position where they can read it, and it's available and being promoted in their local library as part of their Pride, LGBTQ, blah, 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 blah stuff. And you're saying that's okay? Well, it's just one book. And you're like, okay, what is wrong with you?
As someone who, I am conservative bordering on libertarian, as someone in that area of the political spectrum, I will go on record right now and say I am not for banning books. Get them out of school libraries where, you can control a school library where a parent doesn't have any control, right? They're sending their kid to this school because, number one, they have to, basically, by law.
Yeah.
Other than homeschool, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They're sending their kid to this school with a library in it, so they should have some type of say of what content they are exposed to or are allowed to be exposed to or is in their purview. In a public library, fine. Don't ban the book. Have the book, fine. Maybe don't put it in a kids section because it's not really kids, put it in the young adult section, something like that. And if a parent wants their, 11, 10-year-old to see it, that's their choice. But a parent who doesn't want their 10 or 11-year-old to see it in a school library, that's their choice. And so it should not be readily available to them in their school library. These are two very different things. School library, public library are very different things.
I don't think it should be in a library, period, because it's not fiction, it's not educational, it's not historic, it's not anything. And if you really, really want a child to see this book, just buy off of Amazon or where the fuck you can get it. Like, I don't think that it should be anywhere near... Like, just the little segments I saw are horrifying.
Right.
And those are like you can't have a copy of FHM magazine in your local library or in a school library. And that's 10 times better than whatever the fuck this is.
I guess my point is I'm not a fan of censorship in as much as you can control someone seeing it. Like,
yes.
if you can make the conscious effort of saying, yes, I would like to see this, or yes, I would like my child to see this, that is your right, that is your choice. But if you have no say in it and the child might see it, that's a problem.
Yeah, because at that point it becomes like purposeful exposure. Like,
and your right as a parent has been removed.
Right. And I think in a lot of senses, like, there is a very 7 levels deep First Amendment argument that can be made for it. But in a sense, a library becomes a government-funded regular library or a government-funded school library, becomes an extension of government-sanctioned speech. And a book that's in those libraries now falls under a different purview. It's like the government is saying it's okay for your child to see this stuff that the majority of parents would object to in a library setting. So, I don't know. Look, I know it when I see it, and I saw it, and it was bad. So,
yeah,
I'll leave it at that for me. But I do want to get these, what are they called, wise nuts? I would love to do a podcast with these guys, and I think I can throw my name around. I hit someone in the face with, I don't know. I am fascinated with how this turns out, because this guy was this Greek guy. What was his name?
Constantine Anthony.
Constantine Anthony. I think he sold me a car. Constantine Anthony, no, I was a Frenchman, is running for LA supervisor. After this interview, I think his political career is done. It's on the level of the Gavin Newsom interview on Adam Carolla's show, where he like made it seem like poor people are too stupid to get a bank account. Like, it was pretty bad.
If this gains any traction, and then the stuff that he said gains any, notoriety, then yeah, I think it's done.
It's over, sis.
Yeah, but anyone who, Constantine Anthony, you and anyone who votes for you can go fuck yourselves.
He does. That's the problem.